Morning glory, evening grace, brother and sisters. Good to have everybody back along with us here with a Temperance Awakening. And we look forward to continuing in our alcohol lectures here today. And going to be looking at something that most folks are pretty familiar with, something that we need to go over, something very serious. Going to be looking at the risk of alcohol abuse, the risk of alcohol abuse. And so we'll get right into it here, as we've got a pretty good bit to cover. And alcohol abuse refers, to the downside or the consequences of a drinking pattern that, that leads to intoxication and or addiction, causing behavior problems. And, you might have heard that expression, calculated risk. And, they're all of calculated risk, certainly with alcohol. And most of the choices that people make in their life, involve a price that they have to pay if things go wrong. And, especially like with young people, whenever they leave childhood and whenever they begin to think and act like adults, they might find it useful to calculate, and think through some things, as they certainly should. What are the benefits and what are the risks of possible behavior? Certainly alcohol is one of those behaviors, that's something that certainly even a lot of adults, need to calculate. And there are lots of, problem behaviors there that result from drinking alcohol, such as, failure to live up to your responsibilities, to your family or to your career, whatever that might be. Drinking under dangerous conditions, getting in frequent trouble with the law. Having alcohol-related problems, with a spouse, other relatives or friends. And of course, people just don't stop 100 times a day to do many calculations at, some point in an individual's life. Most people just do what is routine. Especially adults, who just choose to drink. They usually just, drink without thinking, about possible consequences of drinking. And then even other people that have decided to abstain from any alcohol, they really don't rethink the issue. Whenever they go to a restaurant that serves alcohol or somebody offers them a drink or something, they say, hey, I'm an abstainer, I don't want to have anything to do with it. And then a lot of alcoholics, they may feel powerless to change their unhealthy behavior pattern. And certainly, though, for young people, who've not yet settled into regular behavior patterns, they can learn about the risk and do their own calculations as they should. And, all of us need to be aware that decisions that we make, eventually, they become habits. And alcohol is a very bad habit. So, of course, first of all here, we have the risk of injury. According to the CDC, which is the, CDC, short for Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, more than 150,000 Americans die every year from trauma to the body. In other words, injury. Some injury to the body. Trauma is the leading cause of death for people aged 1, so from, just babies all the way to people 44 years old. And millions of more people suffer non-fatal injuries. 1 out of 3 individuals, according to the CDC. Sometimes it seems as if the world is, just one big trap ready to go off without warning. That's certainly very true for a person whenever alcohol is in their life. In almost every case, physicians or emergency staff can find an immediate cause for these deaths. For example, if it's a vehicle crash, a fire, poisoning, or a deliberate act of violence. Like that person here for the, in the ER for, they usually find out pretty quick. All too often, the real underlying cause is alcohol use. Meaning a pattern of drinking that, results in at least, one of the following behaviors. Failure to fulfill major responsibilities, drinking in dangerous situations, especially like when driving or, maybe like even like what we're gonna mention here in just a moment. Maybe like on a boat, out fishing, having a good time, but you're getting, if you got beer or liquor or whatever out there, or obviously having alcohol-related legal problems or having alcohol-related relationship problems, like with domestic abuse, something else we're going to mention here in just a little bit. Like in June of 1999, the Annals of Emergency Medicine published a study conducted at the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, which found that alcohol is often an important factor in fatal injuries of all kinds. Compiling multi-year data from medical examiners around the country, the study found that 31.5% of homicide victims were intoxicated at the time of death with a BAL, which is blood alcohol level, percentage of alcohol in the bloodstream, of at least 0.10. Similarly, the victims of 31% of unintentional injury deaths caused by negligent or careless actions, and 22% of suicide deaths were intoxicated at the time of death. So very high numbers there, that alcohol's in. Now, the problem, is very long-standing. According to a 1989 alcohol alert from the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, surveys also showed a high percentage of injuries involving people with high blood alcohol levels. Intoxicated individuals cause some 40 to 50% of major vehicle fatalities, which are deaths, 25 to 35% of non-fatal motor vehicle injuries, and 64% of fires and burns, 48% of frostbite and hypothermia, which is a very low body temperature, generally resulting from passing out or sleeping outdoors in cold weather, and 20% of suicides. And furthermore, more studies show that alcohol-related injuries tend to be more serious ones. And those reasons are clear. But see, alcohol, even in moderate levels, can weaken people's judgment, slow down their reaction times and make them clumsy and uncoordinated. And that's why, no supervisor, like on a job, no supervisor, with any sense is going to allow a person to operate dangerous machinery while somebody's under the influence of alcohol. So as we mentioned there, let's mention something good here, have a question and an answer here. We know that people who operate machinery in the workplace shouldn't drink, but what about operating machinery for recreation? Like, for example, boating, that's very popular. A lot of people not just going boating, but, with alcohol. Let's get out there, let's go boating. Maybe throw a fishing rod in the lake, try to catch some fish. While we have some, beer, liquor, wine, whatever. So what's the answer to that? What about boating? More than half of all recreational boating deaths involve alcohol. So there's your answer right there. You hear about that. People that die out boating, more than half of them are somebody that was, drunk. According to the U.S. Coast Guard, a boat operator with a blood alcohol concentration above 0.10 is 10 times more likely to be killed in a boating accident than a boater with a 0 blood alcohol concentration. A little bit of alcohol may actually be more dangerous for boaters than for automobile drivers. Because, see, out there on, in a boat, you got to deal with the sun, the wind, noise, vibration, like boat motion, other boats, that are out on the water, or other people out on the water doing other things, kayaking or, whatever. That can really enhance the effects of alcohol when you got all that other stuff going on. So, you have to be alert when operating any kind of machinery or vehicle. And now looking at risk in the emergency room. Being sober is no guarantee that you'll always, avoid injury. And also, people who've been drinking might become trauma victims through events beyond their control. But even if alcohol did not cause an injury, drinking entails an additional risk for those who are injured. It can get in the way of a physician making a accurate diagnosis, like if you'd been drinking, but, your accident or whatever wasn't the result of alcohol because you were tipsy-topsy or whatever, but, that can get in the way of making, the right diagnosis for a physician. When a trauma victim turns up at a hospital emergency room with a bruise on their forehead, slurred speech, and an unsteady gait, the medical staff, is going to normally suspect a serious head injury. But when they get a whiff of alcohol on a person, on a person's breath, they're going to see a different picture. They're going to, present a different synopsis. They should still check for serious injury, but in the real high-pressure world of an ER, some staff might be tempted to lead the victim to a bed to sleep it off, while they deal with other emergencies. And if a patient who's been drinking does not show signs of intoxication in the ER, that can still be dangerous. Because as we're going to look at, not later today, but, in our later lectures, alcohol just doesn't mix well with many standard medications, including antibiotics and painkillers. If a patient is unconscious, confused, or fails to tell staff that they've been drinking, the drug might be administered with dangerous results. And now looking at the risk of unintended death. Some unfortunate people are deathly allergic to even one peanut. Everybody else, can eat as many peanuts as they want and maybe still have a bellyache, but the reverse is certainly true of alcohol. Almost nobody is truly allergic to alcohol, but anybody, though, can get seriously ill or even die, if they drink too fast, if they drink too much alcohol too quick, or in combination, like we said, with other substances. like with other drugs or, like we said, medications, like antibiotics and painkillers and so forth. And so now particularly looking at binge drinking. Regular heavy drinking can be dangerous to health. Binge drinking, when somebody has 5 or more drinks on one occasion, is an injury we're just waiting to happen. But chugging, drinking a large quantity in a short period of time, can kill a person also. As a general rule, the liver of an average person can metabolize or break down the alcohol in one drink in about an hour. But people who drink more than one drink an hour, whether shots of whiskey or a bottle of beer, are overloading their bloodstreams with alcohol. The more they put into their system, the higher their blood levels, their blood alcohol level is going to be. When your blood alcohol level goes above 0.08, which might just happen after a few standard-sized drinks, you're considered unfit to drive in most states. Legally, although some people may be unfit to drive at even lower levels, after just 1 or 2 drinks. As the level rises, and it certainly does if you drink too fast, the toxic effects of alcohol on the brain and nervous system start to kick in. When your blood alcohol level hits 0.25, you lose your coordination, and you can easily choke on your own vomit if you're alone, or if your drinking companions are also intoxicated and unable to help. When you can continue chugging, your blood alcohol level can rise above 0.30 when you could pass out. And at 0.35, your breathing may stop without immediate medical care to restore your breathing. You might die. Then at 0.40, even if your breathing can be restored, you might suffer permanent brain damage and slip into a coma. You might think that once you pass out and can no longer continue drinking, you can never reach the deadly levels. Unfortunately, the BAL, your blood alcohol level, can keep rising even after you stop drinking, because the alcohol in your stomach continues to be absorbed into the bloodstream faster than your body can break it down. Like if your friends or whoever you're drinking with or whatever pours coffee into you, push you into a cold shower, or walk you around the room, you might feel a bit more alert, but none of those things do reduce your blood alcohol level. And the damage that it causes if somebody, if you're ever in that situation, whenever you come across somebody that's been chugging alcohol, you should seek immediate medical attention. So let's look at that there, what we mentioned about giving somebody alcohol. Somebody asked the question, if my friend has had so much to drink that they pass out, can that person be revived if I make him drink lots of coffee? That's actually wrong. Coffee might can help somebody stay awake if they've been drinking, but as we said, it's going to have no impact on their blood alcohol level. If they've had so much alcohol to drink that they pass out, they certainly could be in danger. Like if you're in that situation, once again, make sure the person keeps breathing normally and, get the medical attention. And make sure that they're either laying on their side or they're upright to keep them from choking on their own vomit. And now looking at chugging in a little bit more detail here. Chugging means drinking a large amount of alcohol in as short a time as possible. It's relatively rare among adults, so not many adults do it, but it's all too common among younger people. Whenever we say adults there, we're probably the stats are going to show. When you're like 25 and older, chugging is very rare, but even for some people that are of age, like 21 to 24 years old, like people in their early 20s, and then especially, like people that are underage, like teenagers, people that are to 20 years old, it's very common among them. Underage drinkers are much more likely to engage in the activity for a number of reasons. Of course, a lack of experience and a lack of knowledge or two, but then also like teenagers who know that they're not allowed to buy alcohol when attending, like a party, a concert, or some type of sporting event. They could compensate that by chugging down several drinks before they arrive at that destination. Kind of drinking as if their stomachs were fuel tanks that can tap as needed in the course of an evening. But, it doesn't work that way at all when chugging alcohol. Instead, all the alcohol is absorbed into the blood in a matter of an hour or so. Instead of a steady high, these young drinkers can expect a brief roller coaster ride with extreme intoxication, followed by a physical or mental collapse. And kids who feel insecure might try to impress their friends with their ability, to hold the liquor, like people play those games. Like kids, who want to be accepted, like by a club, a fraternity in college, or like a crowd of other kids or whatever, they might calculate that the goal's worth accepting the challenge to chug. But if they really knew the risk of brain damage or even possible death, they probably wouldn't do it. And once again, even modest amounts of alcohol can kill when combined with a prescription like medication, or, even some over-the-counter medications, and then certainly, illicit drugs. Like, at the very least, if you're fighting a bacterial infection, alcohol can make antibiotics lose their effect in your system, leading to a surge in the bacteria that you're trying to fight. And at the worst, alcohol can intensify the effects of certain other drugs, causing unpredictable damage to vital body systems. And when mixing drugs and alcohol, a little bit of knowledge can be a very dangerous thing. A friend might tell you that mixing alcohol with a particular drug gives you a stronger high and can't harm you. Perhaps a friend has done that once or twice and they've lived to tell the tale, but, everybody's body's different. Just because they were able to handle it that once or twice don't mean that you'll be able to. And if that individual tries that a third or a fourth time, mixing that drug with alcohol, they may not live then either to tell it after the third or fourth time. And now something we're all very familiar with now, looking at domestic abuse. Domestic abuse, which is the regular mistreatment of one family member or romantic partner by another, is one of the more heartbreaking phenomena often associated with drinking. A study in the December 1999 New England Journal of Medicine reported that alcohol abuse was the greatest single risk factor causing injuries to female victims of domestic violence. But, the problem certainly goes well beyond the headline-grabbing crimes of violence. Abuse can include frightening, like even frightening verbal assaults, insults, unfair criticism, a denial of affection, like a man so drunk says, "Oh, I really don't love you, even though you're my wife." Broken promises, poor supervision to children, something we're going to look at, a lack of support to your spouse or children, or neglecting your children. Now, as we said, child abuse is a growing problem. The National Clearinghouse on Child Abuse and Neglect Information of the United States Department of Health and Human Services reported that in 2001, more than 900,000 children were victims of child maltreatment. A rate of 12.4 out of every 1,000 kids. Of these, 57% suffered neglect, 19% suffered physical abuse, 10% sexual abuse, and 7% psychological maltreatment. 1999, the National Center on Addiction and Substance Abuse at Columbia University stated that alcohol and drug abuse among parents are the most important causes of the rise in child abuse and neglect in recent years. The center found that parents who abuse drugs or alcohol are 2.7 times more likely to abuse their kids and more than 4 times more likely to neglect them. The National Clearinghouse on Child Abuse and Neglect Information reported in 2003 that an earlier 1989 study found that alcohol and drug abuse by parents were involved in some 70% of child neglect cases in many urban areas. Certainly, substance abuse is not generally the only cause of these problems. Other personal or social factors are often involved, but alcohol just makes the problem worse and harder to resolve. A parent whose time and money are devoted to heavy drinking is less likely to carry out his or her responsibilities to their spouse and children. Parental neglect and alcohol abuse are related in another way. Even the best of parents may not be able to protect their children in every situation. However, parents who abuse alcohol are less able to provide their teenage kids with supervision or attention, and poor parental supervision is an important cause of teenage alcohol abuse. Now look at this here. How about women and alcohol abuse? So, in the past, researchers found, kind of going probably up to, the early 90s, maybe mid-90s if we're being fair, researchers found that for Americans as a whole, men are twice as likely as women to suffer from alcohol abuse or alcohol dependency, but this gap, is disappearing. If behavior among teenagers especially was any guide going back, 20 years ago, to this CASA study that was done in 2002, found that male and female ninth graders are just as likely to drink and to binge drink. There really wasn't much of a difference at all in any of their percentile, only a couple of percent, both times. And, now, that's very true. There are just about as many women now as, adult women, who abuse alcohol as men. And some researchers, can say that gender equality is in part responsible for that change now. Like with people saying, well, a woman can do anything a man can do. A man can, drink liquor 5 days a week than I can. Many girls now believe that they don't have to follow, the old-fashioned idea, about feminine behavior. Some might think if, boys can do it, even though it's illegal and risky, then why can't we girls? Whenever we're talking about the young people, the teenagers. And unfortunately, nature is not always fair. Behaviors that are harmful for one gender may be even more harmful for the other, and alcohol abuse is one of those. And the female gender suffers the most, and we're going to look at that there, like with health. That's also what we talked about, like in our tobacco lectures. That we just did, like we looked at there. Females who use tobacco, they have more health problems, than males do, and that's also true for alcohol. Females who abuse alcohol, they end up having more health problems and even also more social problems usually than men do. And if a boy and a girl drink the same quantity of alcohol, the girl's blood alcohol level is higher. For at least 3 reasons, possibly even more than this, for at least 3. They're like, to begin with, girls tend to be smaller than boys. And at any age group and body size influences how much alcohol can be safely imbibed. Secondly, boys have more active stomach enzymes, protein chemicals in the stomach that speed up chemical reactions, such as breaking down alcohol before it can be absorbed into the bloodstream. Then lastly, according to the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, even when a man and a woman have the same body size, the man has higher body water content, which dilutes the alcohol to some degree. The higher blood alcohol level has 2 dangerous consequences. The girl becomes intoxicated sooner than the boy, and her health is more likely to suffer, as we just mentioned. And on average, American women live longer than men, but women alcohol abusers, though, do not benefit from that advantage. Women have higher death rates than male alcohol abusers for several different alcohol-related problems, such as liver disease, unintentional injuries, and suicide. And then in addition, too much alcohol can upset the delicate balance of hormones that control a woman's reproductive system. This can cause menstrual periods to be irregular or painful, or even to stop altogether. Among pregnant women, it can cause miscarriage. Among older women, it can cause premature menopause. And heavy drinkers, or people who have 5 or more drinks per occasion, at least 5 different times a month, often lose calcium, a vital nutrient for bones and all body cells. Alcohol seems to upset the chemical system that distribute the mineral through the body. Calcium actually drains away from bone tissue and is expelled in urine. This happens with men as well as women, but the consequences seem to be worse for females, because women have a greater natural risk of osteoporosis, a disease of the bones that can lead to weakness and fractures. The additional damage caused by alcohol can make the difference between a manageable condition and crippling pain. Some of the social consequences of alcohol abuse, whether by men or by women, once again, usually they fall more heavily on women. Such consequences include spousal abuse, rape, and unplanned or unprotected sex, which in turn can cause unwanted pregnancy, and sexually transmitted diseases. And alcohol in large, persistent quantities can be devastating to women. On the other hand, small amounts of alcohol, 1 or 2 drinks a day, might help older women produce estrogen, the basic female hormone, according to a study reported by the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism in 2001. And as a result, moderate women drinkers could possibly have a lower risk than non-drinkers for osteoporosis and heart disease, but that's something that really just isn't worth it, though. Just one possible health benefit. That's not worth, dealing with a poison. And now looking at the social cost of alcohol. Economists have tried to calculate the economic cost to society of alcohol abuse. Unfortunately, hospitals and insurance companies don't always keep separate tabulations of illnesses and injuries that are caused or partly caused by alcohol abuse. Thus, the calculations are really just estimates or educated guesses. But we did, though, hit it off in 2000. In 2000, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services felt sure enough about the facts to estimate the cost of alcohol abuse to the U.S. economy in 1998. And the total cost of that in 1998 was $185 billion. The largest component was lost earnings and production in the workplace, figured at $134 billion. Medical costs came to nearly $19 billion, not including $7.5 billion for treatment programs. Alcohol-related crime cost $6.3 billion, while alcohol-related motor vehicle crashes cost $5.7 billion. And how do these costs add up? Well, for starters, alcohol abusers cost employers 4 times the average amount in sickness and injury benefits. They also have double the normal rate of absence from work. 9% of heavy drinkers miss work due to hangovers, according to the National Council on Alcohol and Drug Dependency, while 6% actually go to work drunk. And there's no way to calculate the effects of intoxicated employees on coworker morale and client relations, which is, another big headache. So then if these figures are correct, the annual cost to society is approximately $14,000 for each problem drinker, based on a total of $13 million, according to the 2001 National Household Survey on Drug Abuse. Very expensive habit. And then looking at the health cost of this. In 1996, according to the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, more than 110,000 people died in the United States from alcohol-related causes, which works out to 32.2 deaths for every 100,000 Americans. And this actually, though, is an improvement from from 1979, when that rate was 42.2. So the agency broke down the total into the following leading causes: 19% for motor vehicle injuries, 9% of murders, 8% of suicides, 7% of people that had cirrhosis of the liver, and 7% for people that have cancer of the esophagus. Then the other 50% was a large variety of disease and injuries caused or worsened by alcohol abuse. So then just closing it out here, the short-term benefits of alcohol could be obvious, to just about anybody, including young people, whenever we talk about what we could say are short-term benefits. Like being included, to a group of people, being in a fraternity or whatever, relaxing, having a good time. But the risks, though, the risks are not immediately apparent, but they're very, very, very dangerous. And that's why everybody, especially young people, has to say, is sipping alcohol worth it? Absolutely not. All the social, and all the health cost, all the risk. It's just horrible. So thank you so much for being with us here. So going over some very important things here in this lecture. And so thanks once again for being with us. Let's take these things and weigh them on our hearts and our minds and make those right choices. And we'll see you in our next lecture. Until then, till that every can the shadows flee away, I'm Dr. Cooper and I love you and I appreciate you.